What is the Urantia Book? Is it fact or fiction? As a longtime reader of the Urantia Book since 1971, I invite you to come along with me on a journey of adventures of the mind and spirit into a realm of both outer and inner space where few dare to go and even fewer have dared to travel. While the posts on this blog will tend to introductions to the Urantia Book and easier to understand topics of discussion, the pages will go into very advanced concepts for study. You might ask, how did you find the Urantia Book? A better question to ask is, however, how did the Urantia Book find you? In October of 1969, I was just 18 years of age, working at a production plant in northern Indiana, which manufactured refrigerator pumps and parts, feeling at that time no small amount of uncertainty about the future. I was hired to train as a nickel plating specialist, which involved large tanks, electromagnetic rods inserted into the water, balls of pure nickel, cadmium, sulfuric and phosphoric acids, and other chemicals. As you might imagine, I had to wear a fair amount of protective gear. Then came a full 8 hours of dipping large numbers of parts into the plating tanks for a specified amount of time. From there, they were taken to dry, painted, labeled, assembled, and shipped. One evening, I noticed two men seemingly coming out of nowhere, dressed in rather plain brown-looking suits, who stopped by my central platform. They asked me to step down and talk to them. Being rather naive, I assumed that they might be from upper management. Instead, they asked me a couple of strange questions about my religious and spiritual beliefs, which caught me off guard. This happened so long ago I do not remember exactly what I said to them. But what I did say caused them to pull out a large blue book from within a zipped-up leather case. I had just exited only 6 months prior to this episode from a 1.5-year stint in a charismatic Pentecostal church. And as you might imagine, having left on not so positive terms after asking the pastor questions he couldn't answer, I was very wary of anything religious or spiritual. When they began to explain to me about God and the universe, I was equally fearful that they might be from a religious cult, as well as fearing for my job if management caught me spending time away from my direct responsibilities. I then advised them I couldn't talk to them any longer, explaining it might cost me my job. They invited me to talk to them further away from work and gave me a business card. I actually called these two men, meeting with them 2 more times, but never really feeling ready for the information they were giving me. This is the first time the Urantia Book found me. It was only about 1 year and 3 months later, I found myself halfway around the world in Turkey, stationed on a TAC, Tactical Air Command remote communication site, where only 21 other male members of the Air Force were also stationed. There was a very big man named George who stood about 6'3" and weighed about 350 pounds. He was not overweight so much as just a big guy and friendly. The men there affectionately referred to him as George the Friendly Giant. George worked in the communications equipment section on the very summit, and just adjacent to the barracks. I, on the other hand, worked inside the barracks as administrative assistant to the captain of the site, our 2 offices connected to each other at the far end of the building. George's barracks room was adjacent to my office, being the last room on the right across the hallway. George didn't mingle much. You could often find him in his barracks room with the door open and reading a big blue book. By this time, I had forgotten all about the Big Blue Book, first introduced to me in the manufacturing plant in Goshen, Indiana in 1969. It was now February of 1971. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. I just had to stop by his room, and as I was passing one evening on my way to check if the office door was locked. So I stopped and asked George, "What in the world is that Big Blue Book you are reading?" He smiled, then said, "I'm not going to tell you, nor will I show it to you." Like a good salesman ready for the close, he paused, then he continued, "I'll decide whether you're ready for it if you agree to meet me in the mess hall at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. So we have time to talk before breakfast. Be prepared. I will ask you some questions." This, of course, whetted my curiosity, so I eagerly got up the next morning, meeting him in the adjacent recreation cafeteria building. We sat at the long table in the picture to the left, if you're on the site reading this article, closest to the kitchen area, where the cooks prepared and served the meals. We didn't just meet once, we continued to meet for the next several weeks, frequently and always at 4:30 a.m. in the mess hall. George asked me many questions about my background, growing up, religious experience, my philosophy of life, my concepts about the mind, spiritual concepts, God and the universe, while providing very few answers. He drew me out. It was the right approach. I was hungry for answers to all of my many questions about the meaning and purpose of life and how it all fit together on this crazy mixed up planet called Earth. During our final early morning meeting, George stated he thought I was ready to read the Urantia Book. He gave me the address to the Urantia Foundation in Chicago, Illinois, and instructions on how to order it. Amazingly, just 2 weeks later, I had the Big Blue Book hardcover edition in my hands. The first thing I did during the evening and after work was to sit down at my desk and let the book open up to wherever it may, and by chance, it opened up to the section on Adam and Eve, answering all of my questions, which I had posed to a Pentecostal minister just a little over a year before, who didn't have a clue, telling me he was afraid I would get possessed by a demon for asking too many penetrating questions. This pastor even went so far as to say that this knowledge about the children of the gods going in into the women of mortals and having children with them was forbidden unless God revealed it to him first. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and which solidified my distrust of organized religion from that day forward. It is now 42 years later, and having read the Urantia Book multiple times, I can tell you it was a life-changing experience then, and even more so now. I left out something of great importance. It was when I read over the 28 statements of high mortal philosophy, I decided to adopt these 28 principles, apply them to my life, and live by them. Doing this led me into some very big challenges, including my own dark night of the soul for a period of approximately 3 to 4 years in my late 20s. These 28 points of light still guide my life 42 years later, and now more than ever. As I upgrasp in my personal experiences, I can feel the Spirit in its downgrasp, reaching downward and outward in my mind, ever drawing me toward the greater destiny to come. Is the Urantia Book fact or fiction? The fact of the Urantia Book coming into existence, and by mysterious unrevealed means, cannot be denied as fact. And the fact of the existence of the Urantia Book itself cannot be denied as fact. With regard to the content of the Urantia Book, many of the previously thought scientific errors in its content have or are now being verified as science, in effect, is catching up to the prophetic science it contains. The spiritual precepts and concepts as they relate to the cosmology, cosmogony, and the cosmography of both the material and spiritual universes simply must be experienced to determine whether they are real to you or not. What I can tell you without doubt is that it is the only contextual information, which has held my attention and focus for the last 4 decades of my life. And I would clarify that it does not have a hold over my thinking, rather, it has set my thinking free. Rather than imprison my intellect, it has caused my intellect to become highly active and interactive, liberating my thought processes to journey where few ever dare to travel.